I think we're done. I'm just going to make one comment that you don't need to answer, and that's the use, the sort of reference back to Bradford Hill. I mean, the seminal paper was 1965. The Surgeon General's report was 1964, with essentially the same sensible discussions about evidence. I feel like this process has moved so far away from it that the grounding in the Hill guidelines, criteria, considerations, to me is an artifice. And you may be claiming something in history here that is perhaps not useful, and in a sense it comes with some baggage as well. So I will bring up the comment, don't answer, and I think it's just something for you to think about. I was, when I saw this appear in sort of the AOP, MOA kind of world with discussions of this, I felt like Bradford Hill would probably say, find another name. In any case, let me stop that, and thanks. This has been very thought-provoking. So I think we now will move on. We have two public commenters and then a break. So let's see, let me get organized. So I think at this point, our first public commenters, Andrew Rooney from NIEHS.
I don't have any slides, but thank you. So I have the unenviable task, plus John just pointed out that I'm keeping you from break. I apologize in advance. But what I would like to say is that these are very nice presentations, and I'm going to concentrate on a few of them, but from the group as a whole, particularly from Catherine Gibbons, as well as from Andrew Kraft, covering some of the mechanistic information. But the 3 points that I would like to get across from an NTP perspective, and I am Andrew Rooney, the director or the acting director of Office of Health Assessment and Translation, so very familiar with these procedures and systematic review in general. But first, that we fully support the movement towards a scientific judgment based within a structured framework in the evidence integration portion. Really exciting to see that how that's been fleshed out within the IRIS program. And then second, to more directly address the mechanistic information and to reiterate a lot of what I heard here today, that decisions on how to use the mechanistic data with this iterative process are also very encouraging. NTP is highly supportive of using that integrative or that iterative approach, depending on the purpose, the goals, or the focus of the evaluation that's evolving as you go. Depending on those characteristics of the evidence base that you might have, again, the coverage of the animal studies, the human studies, and whether you might have a data-rich chemical that has a lot of information on a consistent health outcome, perhaps, then you may not need the mechanistic data as much, and then therefore focus your resources away from additional data extraction and all of the use of the mechanistic data. In contrast, the data-poor chemicals that I heard some of what EPA seems to be doing is to focus more effort there on the mechanistic data, perhaps if they intend to do read-across, as was pointed out. But then also, I think that when I heard Andrew Kraft talking about pulling that information into the inventory so that you can see what you might have with the mechanistic data and then making a series of iterative decisions on what you might then do with the data. That seems like a very logical approach that would help you get towards the ultimate conclusions. And what we would say at NTP right now is, my second point is organizing that mechanistic data, this iterative approach around critical information needs. And so as you have the human or animal evidence and you say, we have a certain level of confidence or we're ready to reach our conclusions, but there's something missing. What is that critical information need? And then can it be filled with the mechanistic information? Is it the biological plausibility of the animal models for predicting human health? What is it? what is the critical information need that you can organize the mechanistic data around? And so, again, I'd just like to support what they've been doing and add a little bit of our focus as well. And then with that critical information needs, I would say that we would also encourage avoiding a default of going through full data extraction of the mechanistic information, pursuing all the different varieties of potential full AOP from the molecular initiating event through the phenotypic data if you don't need it for reaching the type of conclusions that you already have strong data sets for. And finally, when you're doing that inventory approach, we're already in some communications, but consider with that inventory if there's other software such as Tableau that you can do an interactive approach that would show you where you have data-rich areas and data-poor areas, and being able to transmit that to the public or to share that information with other institutions. So I'm impressed.
Okay, thank you. And you're early. Okay, thank you. Our next commenter is Robin Gentry from Rambo.
First, thank you for this opportunity to provide comments in this very important meeting. I'm a toxicologist and principal with Ramble, an environmental consulting company, and I've been conducting human health risk assessments for about 30 years now, and I actually spent the early part of my career developing IRIS documents. We've been talking about 3 streams of evidence today, and all 3 of those streams are critical. But I want to talk a little bit about why the mechanistic stream of evidence is so critical to the IRIS process. In the 2014 document from the NAS, they noted the need for systematic review and quality review and weight of evidence for that entire stream of evidence. And we've talked about the challenges with that and how that would probably require, more critical review of the studies, more scientific judgment, and even more underlying review of the data that constitute those studies. But I want to argue, too, that the mechanistic stream of evidence represents the area where our scientific research is expanding, especially in light of the challenges with toxicity in the 21st century, toxicity testing in the 21st century. And this is the way we're going to incorporate our understanding of the biology into the integration of this evidence. And it's also of critical importance because it's the underlying basis. It was the main focus for the revisions to EPA's on cancer guidelines, recognizing in 2005 the information that we were gaining on how cancer could be induced and how that research was expanding. The approaches that we're talking about for systematic review that have been discussed, and while I applaud those, the ones that are grounded in OHAT don't even require mechanistic evidence to draw hazard conclusions. They're an add-on at the end to upgrade or downgrade a hazard classification. But within the IRIS process, these data are not only key to the hazard identification step, but they're to provide the underlying framework for the decision process for the dose response step. So this makes the integration of this mechanistic stream of evidence and its relevance to the IRIS process extremely important. Formaldehyde's been mentioned several times today, and this chemical provides an example of one which consideration of the mechanistic data is critical, especially because it's an endogenously produced compound. The conclusions in the 2010 IRIS were based largely on evidence from the epidemiological stream of evidence, focusing on hematopoietic and nasopharyngeal cancers. And NAS even noted the need for better integration. And since that time, the mode of action evidence for that compound has expanded greatly, and it's providing evidence of a lack of systemic delivery, calling into question the biological plausibility, and it's also provided additional mechanisms for nasopharyngeal cancers that may have a nonlinear mechanism. And so when you compare this draft to other global drafts where this mechanistic information has been fully integrated, you get very different conclusions. And so this highlights the critical need for the review of that data and the integration of this stream of evidence as an underlying framework in drawing conclusions regarding human health. For formaldehyde, too, consideration of this data is not only related to biological plausibility, but how does exogenous exposure affect levels in the body that are endogenously present? And what is necessary to overwhelm those processes? And without that information, we're likely to make decisions and talk about acceptable levels that would not be realistic considering the levels that are in the body. We may set levels below what is normally present in the body. So consideration of these data will ensure that recommendations are consistent with our understanding of how health effects occur. So this example highlights the importance of this mechanistic stream of evidence specifically for the IRIS process. And while formaldehyde provides a single example, there are likely others.
30 seconds.
Because the focus of this evidence stream is embedded in the EPA's guidelines, it's an evidence stream that should be subject to the same critical review and full integration with the other evidence streams to result in strong scientifically based conclusions regarding the potential for human health effects. Thank you.
Thank you. I think thanks to both the commenters, and I think we have a well-deserved 15-minute break. So 15 minutes.